The golf ball goes too far. Fix it, now. That demand came from three men with 11 green jackets between them. After 3 years of resistance, Player, Nicklaus, and Watson forced golf's governing bodies into a rollback, a new test capping ball distance at 317 yards. They were told they'd won. But by January 2030, when the rule takes full effect, those three will be 94, 90, and 80 years old. The longest hitters say they can't even feel the difference. So what exactly was won? It began with 3 tee shots on the morning of April 9th. The first light at Augusta on April 9th, 2024, found Gary Player standing at the tee, a black cap shadowing his eyes. At 90, he still kicked his leg high before the swing, a gesture as familiar as the azaleas behind him. The ball left the club face with a crisp sound and arced gently, landing short but safe, a line drawn between memory and muscle. Jack Nicklaus, 86, waited as his son Jackie placed the ball for him. He grinned and called out, "Spread out, I don't want to kill anybody." The gallery laughed, but Nicklaus's eyes stayed fixed on the fairway. His swing was careful, the ball hooking softly and sailing just over the heads of those who had stepped aside. Tom Watson, at 76, set his feet with quiet purpose. His drive traveled clean and straight, splitting the center of the fairway, just as he had done for decades. No one spoke as the last ball settled. There was no need. The ceremony was never about distance, but the shape of each shot, how far, how true, how much remained. The morning air held a silence that said more than any speech about what it means to last. Behind the call for action stood 11 green jackets, their combined legacy stretching across generations of Masters champions. The message was delivered without ceremony. The golf ball goes too far. Fix it, now. The demand reached beyond nostalgia, folding in the realities of land, water, and cost. Gary Player, with no hint of irony, called for a 60-yard cut, insisting, "There is no such thing as a par 5 in the world today." Jack Nicklaus, always the tactician, pressed for immediate change, but quietly calculated whether any rollback would matter. Their authority was collective, their urgency unmistakable. 2 months later, governing bodies promised a response, but the answer, when it arrived, only partly matched the scale of what had been asked. The victory felt real, but its limits were already visible. The new rule begins with a number, 317 yards. This is not a playing limit, but the result of a laboratory test. The test, known as the overall distance standard, sets a benchmark for every golf ball that seeks official approval. The process is simple in outline, but exacting in detail. Balls are fired by a robot at a fixed clubhead speed, previously 120 miles per hour, now raised to 125. The launch angle is set at 11 degrees, with a spin rate of 2,200 revolutions per minute. Under these conditions, any ball that travels farther than 317 yards, plus or minus 3 yards, fails the test. A ball that passes may be sold, played, and trusted to conform, whether struck by a champion or a newcomer. This change in test speed is not arbitrary. The governing bodies chose 125 miles per hour to better reflect the fastest swings seen on tour. Raising the speed by 5 miles per hour increases the challenge for manufacturers, tightening the margin for new designs. The result is a projected distance loss. For the longest hitters, about 13 to 15 yards will disappear from their drives. For the average professional, the reduction is closer to 9 to 11 yards. Elite women players can expect to lose 5 to 7 yards. For most amateurs, the difference is small, 5 yards or less, often too little to notice in a weekend round. The 317-yard figure is not a cap on any golfer's actual shot. It is a certification threshold, a reference point that shapes the equipment but does not dictate what happens on the course. Players who swing slower than the test speed will see even less change. The rule does not force anyone to play shorter. It simply ensures that no new ball can exceed the standard when tested at the prescribed speed and conditions. This mechanism is dry by design. It is a gatekeeper, not a referee. The test does not care about weather, altitude, or the shape of a player's swing. It measures only what a ball can do when struck by a machine in a controlled environment with no audience and no history. The simplicity is deliberate. The standard draws a line, and everything else, tradition, strategy, the memory of a perfect drive, happens outside the lab. The effect lands in two places at once. For the professionals who stretch the limits of power, the reduction feels real. For most golfers, the rule is almost invisible, yet the same test governs both. In this way, the rollback answers the technical question raised by the legend's testimony. It delivers a measurable outcome, but leaves open the question of whether that outcome matches the scale of what was demanded. Jack Nicklaus has a way of making a point that lingers long after the microphones are packed away. When asked about the new rule, he didn't reach for celebration. He reached for a metaphor. It's like throwing a deck chair off the Titanic. The image is dry, almost dismissive, but it comes with a calculation. For Rory McIlroy, one of the game's longest hitters, the rollback means losing about 12 yards off the tee. For the average weekend golfer, the difference is so slight, less than a yard, that it vanishes in the grass. Nicklaus stands among the rollback's supporters, yet he's quick to say the adopted change is too small to matter. The mechanism is real, the numbers are honest, but the gesture feels more symbolic than corrective. His skepticism is not about the need for action, but about whether this is action at all. Gary Player did not blink when he called for the ball to be cut back 60 yards. In a world where every yard is measured and defended, his demand landed like a thunderclap. "There is no such thing as a par 5 in the world today," he insisted, and the words hung in the air, half accusation, half lament. The number, 60, sounds like a provocation, something meant to shock the room awake. But Player's reasoning runs deeper than the headline. For him, the problem isn't just how far the longest hitters can send a drive, but how distance has hollowed out the meaning of golf's longest holes. A par 5, once a test of sequence and restraint, now offers the modern pro a chance to reach the green in 2 shots with a mid-iron. The third shot, the layup, the risk of water or sand, these have become afterthoughts. Rory McIlroy, who owns one of the game's most powerful swings, once pointed out that he now hits a 7-iron for his second shot on many par 5s. The club that once belonged to approach play now finishes the longest holes in 2. The effect is not just on scorecards, but on the very shape of strategy. Power compresses the course, turning what should be a journey into a sprint. Player's proposal, outlandish as it sounds, is a protest against that compression. He is not asking for nostalgia. He is defending the architecture of challenge, the puzzles that make each hole more than a number. The tension is clear. 60 yards is a drastic cut, almost unthinkable. Yet the competitive complaint is hard to dismiss. If the par 5 has lost its teeth, what else has slipped away with it? Player's answer is to demand the impossible, not for the sake of the past, but to force the game to reckon with what it wants to be. Golf's argument over distance is often mistaken for nostalgia, but the case pressed by its oldest champions is rooted in the ground beneath their feet. Gary Player, who once crossed continents to play, now warns, "We're running out of water." His voice is not just about par or pride, it is about the future of the course itself. Fred Ridley, chairman of Augusta National, puts the matter in institutional terms. As courses stretch longer, the game consumes more land, more water, and more chemicals with every added yard. The numbers are plain. In the year 2000, The average PGA Tour course measured about 7,200 yards. By 2025, that number had crept up to 7,450. Each extra 100 yards demands roughly half an acre of new turf, and with it, an additional 5 million gallons of irrigation water every year. Extend a course by 200 yards, and the maintenance budget rises by as much as 15%. More mowing, more fertilizer, more time, and more money. The pressure to lengthen is not just a question of records or reputation. It is a physical burden, multiplied across thousands of courses, each one fighting to keep up with the modern ball. Players' warning is not an echo of the past. It is a signal from the present, where the cost of every yard is measured in water drawn from shrinking reservoirs and dollars spent on chemicals that leach into the soil. Ridley's argument is not about preserving a memory. It is about the stewardship of a game that risks outgrowing the very land that sustains it. The rollback campaign, then, is not simply a defense of tradition or the legacy of champions. It is an economic and environmental reckoning, asking whether the pursuit of ever greater distance justifies the price paid by every course, every community, and every future player. 3 years of resistance did not give way quietly. The PGA Tour, from its first statement in June 2021, warned that a universal rollback would disrupt the modern game. Tour officials cited competitive balance, player feedback, and the risk of fragmenting equipment standards as reasons to hold the line. Manufacturers joined the chorus, arguing that the change would penalize the best hitters and unsettle the delicate economics of professional golf. At player forums, the language turned blunt, flawed, premature, unfair. The DP World Tour, facing its own pressures, moved cautiously but did not break ranks. Then, on June 17, 2024, the joint statement arrived. 4 signatures stood side by side: the United States Golf Association, the R&A, the PGA Tour, and the DP World Tour. The document did not hedge. It announced that the professional tours would stand with the governing bodies on the new ball test. The language was formal but unmistakable. After years of division, the game's most powerful institutions were now aligned. The statement ended the era of open opposition, closing the gap that had threatened to split elite golf into rival camps. It was not a bureaucratic note. It was a rare, hard-won agreement. The technicalities of implementation would wait. For now, the victory belonged to the coalition that had demanded action, and the significance of that alignment rippled through every level of the sport. The promise of a solution arrived with a date: January 1st, 2028. That was when the new golf ball rule was set to take effect for the world's best players. But the ink had barely dried on the joint statement before the timeline moved again. On June 17, 2026, the governing bodies announced a 2-year delay. The new reality, January 2030. The rule would not touch a single tournament until the next decade. The arithmetic that once felt urgent now stretched into the distance. By then, Gary Player will be 94, Jack Nicklaus will be 90, Tom Watson will be 80. Each number lands with its own silence. The men who stood at Augusta and called for change, who gave their names, their histories, their annual swing on the first tee, will face the rule's arrival as elders. The years between promise and delivery are not just a matter of scheduling. They are a measure of time itself, counted out in birthdays and lost seasons. The delay was explained with the language of process. More feedback was needed, more testing, more time to prepare the game for a meaningful shift. The statement referenced environmental pressures and the burden of rising costs. But the effect was clear. The victory, so recently won, now waited on a horizon that kept moving away. Inside the ropes, the difference is even harder to feel. Cameron Young, one of the longest hitters of his generation, tried the new ball on a launch monitor. The result, he said, was almost indistinguishable. It's too small to feel for the longest hitters. At 127 miles per hour, the robot's swing shaved just 5 to 7 yards off his drive. The numbers on the monitor changed, but the sensation did not. For the players who push the limits of power, the rollback is a technical adjustment, not a transformation. There is a gap between writing a rule and living its consequences. On paper, the rollback exists, a universal standard, a new test, a date circled on the calendar. In practice, the world of professional golf moves on, waiting for a change that will arrive after another Masters, and another, and another. The Legends campaign won the argument. The policy is real, but the question remains, can a rule that is almost invisible in play serve as stewardship for the game, or does it settle the debate without solving the problem? Today, the length of a golf hole and the price of its upkeep still shape who can play and for how long. The new rule lives on paper, but the land and water remain finite. Real stewardship demands more than gestures, even from legends. The future of the game will be measured not in yards, but in what we choose to protect. Subscribe for more stories that go beyond the scorecard.